Hi, this is Scott Welch, Muscle Insider Magazine. We're here with Richard Rodriguez. How are you doing today, Richard?
I'm doing phenomenal. Thanks for having me.
You have become the talk of the bodybuilding and fitness industry lately. I mean, I've seen you with RX Muscle, with John Bravo, and a number of different media platforms, which is really awesome. But for those of you who don't know you, maybe just tell me a little bit about how did you get into the whole underground steroid manufacturing business? I mean, obviously, I've read some of the things online, some of the very famous media outlets, but how did you kind of get in that space?
How much time we have? um, it all started when I was at the tender age of 13. When I was at the tender age of 13, I was involved in competitive sports. You name it, from the Taekwondo Federation to from there evolving into the Kickboxing Federation. But I was first exposed to anabolics at the tender age of 13. Competing with these individuals and working out harder, fighting harder, but still getting my butt kicked. So I go to my Shihan and I tell him, "Hey man, why are these people kicking my ass?" And he's saying, "Hey, because they're taking vitamins." And I'm like, "Great, I want those fucking vitamins." So that's when I started being exposed to Dianabol and Adderall, and started down the path of performance enhancement drugs and seeing the effects that it had on me from a performance perspective, and being ruthless in Taekwondo, ruthless in kickboxing, in college and in high school, ruthless in wrestling and ruthless in football. And however, I never got to the point of wanting to actually launch a steroid empire. Fast forward that, graduated from an Ivy League school with an MBA from Stern's Business School in NYU. Started working for some high profile companies, even a publicly traded company named McKinsey for over 6.5 years. And my wife gets pregnant and she's like, "Hey, we have a condo in Miami. I would love to move to Miami and start our life there." During that time, I was like, "But babe, we're making collectively almost $500,000 a year living in New York. You know, it's not going to happen. That kind of lifestyle in Miami." She's like, "Yes, but I'm sure you can make it work." Make a long story short, I go to Miami. I've interviewed with all the who's that you can name, from Oracle, from Burger King corporate to McDonald's to Citrix Systems, Microsoft, you name it. Interviewed with them. When I realized that these VP positions, these executive positions, wanted to pay me a quarter of what I was accustomed to in the States, I said, "Hey, you know what? There has to be some type of secondary income stream that I can come up with that will eventually help me at least sustain my lifestyle." So while I'm driving around Miami Beach, I'm seeing all these HRT, TRT clinics in every
hormone replacement therapy for those.
Exactly.
Testosterone replacement therapy. Yeah.
Exactly. Hormone replacement therapy clinics in every corner, like grocery stores in the hood. So I'm thinking, I was like, this must be freaking legal. And it's a dream for me being a meathead. So I'm like, okay, so how can I do this efficiently?
What year would this have been?
This was 2012. Okay. 2012.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, so it being this frequently available here, it must be legal. Unbeknownst to me, I started what's being embraced now was considered taboo and illegal at that point in time, which is telemedicine, etc., 24/7 live chat, things being done remotely. Whereas, like, if my case would have been done now, it would have had no case, with the exception of maybe the Trenbolone and a couple other things. So what ended up happening was, I said during that time, I was like, how can I minimize my investment up front and launch this as a side business so I can eventually maintain my lifestyle.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, within about a month and a half in, I was already doing close to about $5,000 a day in sales.
Wow.
And it got to the point where during that time, I had a 1-year contract with Quest as one of their executive directors, and I had fuck you power. I'm sorry to say. So I quit my job and I just kept reinvesting the money. And it eventually grew to what was now considered and still considered the largest steroid empire that ever existed. And New York Times and Miami Times referred to me as the Pablo Escobar of steroids.
Okay, so back up for a sec. So you set up a HRT clinic yourself? Or did you just go,
Correct.
I'm going to set up a website and a physical bricks and mortar location and do both? Which one? How did that happen?
In the beginning, it started off with just an online component with live chat features that enabled you, once you got to a specific process, to have, you know, to interact with the doctor on the back end. Sometimes people circumvented that and just went ahead and placed the order. And eventually, as we continued to evolve and grow, it got to the point where I started having brick and mortar areas. One in, you know, like as you noticed, one in Arizona, and a couple in Florida, one in Bal Harbor, and one in downtown Miami. And when I launched when I launched Iron Addicts Gym Miami, I had doctors on staff for a separate business called Hormone Club that was doing it completely above board.
Okay. Okay. So what were the first substances that you guys were carrying? Do you have like testosterone and anthate and cypionate, or what were some of the major steroids you were carrying?
In the beginning, I was primarily a distributor for someone that I built a good relationship with for years. So I knew that the structural integrity of his products, obviously some not available for human consumption, and some that can be legally prescribed. So what I started doing was I started promoting his brands via a private label, i.e. like my own private label, like ProLabs or whatever, etc. And it just grew. It just grew. I started off with like the basic compounds, you know, the testosterone cypionates, propionates, a mixture like a Cysternol 250 on steroids, which is called the Test 500. That till this day, people aren't able to to figure out a way how I was able to compound a product like that. And then I started getting greedy. I started seeing the obscene amount of money coming in.
You weren't manufacturing; you were private label. A leather lab was putting your name on it, and then you would sell that product throughout your network. Yeah,
I would say for the first 6 months.
Yeah,
the first 6 months that was indeed the case, and then by constantly reinvesting the money into the business, I eventually became my own manufacturer.
Okay, so you decided then to turn the page then, and that's when you had, I believe, you're going to manufacture your own. Did you think at that point, how the heck am I going to be able to figure out how to take this, you know, putting a decanoid ester into nandrolone, or the different things you would have had to do? Or did you right away say, I'm just going to find a chemist and then have them walk me through the process? Or what was the thinking at that time?
As I clearly elaborated, at the age of 13, I was exposed to it.
Yeah.
So being the obsessive ADD anal individual that I am, just because I utilized it doesn't necessarily mean that I did not got myself familiarized at that young age on how to compound it. Doesn't mean that I went ahead and compounded it. However, I got myself familiarized with how to effectively compound it, because at the end of the day, one of the things in which I learned in business is that you need to be well versed in all key areas in your business to know whether or not a person is lying to you or screwing. Doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be an accountant, a CPA accountant, but at least enough about accounting to know whether or not your accountant is robbing you.
Yeah.
What I did was I knew that I was the marketing genius. I had the marketing capacity to sell horse shit into a horse farm. However, I did not want to be the one compounding it because it would have been time consuming. So I aligned myself with, I started talking to people in the industry that was buying from me. And I told them what some of my ideas were. And they introduced me to some pretty damn good fucking chemists. However, the bottleneck was that they did not want to relocate to Florida. Hence the reasons why we had the operations in Arizona and in a couple of other areas. And I went to them. I told them some of the ideas of some of the compounds that I wanted to manufacture. And they provided their own insight. And that's how WFN evolved.
Very cool. Okay, so now one of the things I had heard about was a practice of renting a prescription pad.
Mm-hmm.
From a doctor. What exactly is that? I'd never heard of this. I've heard of people stealing prescription pads and bodybuilders, you know, writing prescriptions for Anadrol and different things like that. What exactly is that practice?
I mean, honestly, if you really thoroughly analyze even pain clinics, it's a way of circumventing the process. Because let's face it, becoming a PCAB, a pharmaceutical accreditation board pharmacist, or even getting to become a licensed FDA facility, nobody has the hundreds of thousands of dollars necessary to actually go through that process. Hell, even when I was making $50,000, $60,000 a day, I didn't want to put $500,000 into that process. Yeah, eventually towards the end, I was doing it, but that's neither here or there.
Sure.
So what people do, they look at the prescription legalities depending on the state. Florida, completely unregulated. A felon can leave tomorrow out of prison and open up an HRT/TRT clinic. A felon.
Wow.
Why? Because they do not require a medical license. They can have some old, washed up doctor that's retired, but still has a DEA license active, telling him, hey, you know what? I'll pay you $5 a script. Sometimes he's so old and senile that he doesn't give a shit. He'll just give you his fucking script as long as you send him for $500 a fucking week. You know, and believe it or not, if you were to sit down and observe the industry, I am pretty sure a lot of pain clinics and a lot of HRT companies are still doing that prehistoric method till this day. And hell, I was doing it. I was doing it in the beginning for the people that asked.
Yeah. Now the raw powders, in the past, I know that they'd come in and they'd be labeled as, say, glutamine, and be a kilo of, you know, a steroid powder, like a testosterone suspension or whatever it could be. What is that whole thing? Is it accurate to say that about 90% of all of the underground steroid materials are coming from China?
Yes and no, because when you were importing and exporting to the scale that I was at that point in time, it was really contingent on the product that you wanted to import. Because a lot of ED, sexual enhancement type products like Cialis, Viagra, Comagra jelly, and all that stuff, huge in India. Huge in India. So getting raw materials at a better structural integrity and quality for those kind of products, India all day. Somebody that's not so well versed in the industry and it's just coming on, you know, is just coming into that arena, would automatically go to Alibaba.com or some freaking website and try to extrapolate potential resources out of China. If you had to consolidate, China, of course. I mean, the guy that I eventually had in China, I could have practically gotten anything from them. And when I mean anything, I could have practically gotten anything.
Amazing. Now, in terms of the stuff that, how do they typically get that through customs? I mean, any ideas? Like, obviously, I don't want you to divulge anything that would get either of us in trouble, but is this easy? I mean, COVID must have changed a little bit of that with, you know.
100%. COVID did change it. However, there's a saying in business, where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
I'll give you a perfect example. Australia had the most stringent customs, and I was batting 1,000 bringing things into Australia. Not one of my packages ever being seized. Finished goods. I'm talking about thousands of bottles in a speaker, I would gut out the speakers, or take a TV, gut the TV out in a TV, and ship out that TV to somebody in Australia. So it all piggies back to what I said. It's like, you know, where there's a will, there's a way. Are there more innovative ways in which they're doing it now? Probably. Am I involved in it? Absolutely not. But I mean, I still have an ear on the industry. A lot of people come to me and I kind of smirk when I hear things about, like, you know, protein powders, putting them in speakers, putting it in the best disguise possible. Man, I've seen it all. And it's really left to your imagination, to answer your question.
Now, when you had the lab, one of the labs was in Arizona, and the product would be manufactured there, and then it had to be shipped to a warehouse, I assume, in South Florida.
Correct.
How did you sort of orchestrate that? Was it just somebody who rented a U-Haul van and just kind of did this, or was this kind of, you had a fleet of different regular people driving back and forth transporting that?
It was very, very simple. You wouldn't even believe me. I would send thousands of bottles to the United States Postal Service via priority mail. And if I needed it that much faster because we were backlogged, because our inventory management system was out of whack and he didn't accurately forecast what we would eventually need for the following week, FedEx, it's like, FedEx or UPS.
Okay. Now, Desert Formulations was a company that I think it's been set up by you or your group in Arizona. At what point did you see that the feds were kind of sniffing around? Because I saw some videos that Johnny Bravo had done where he showed people, in the garbage can and kind of like just sniffing around. What point did you sort of get alert that was happening? Was it happening there before it was happening to you in South Florida where they were on to you, or what was going on?
I mean, to put it bluntly, dude, like when I started getting into the business, I knew it was a matter of time. It's just like I said in RX Muscle and in the interviews, I wasn't delusional of what I was doing.
Yeah.
However, researching companies like Tony Bosch at Biogenesis, researching Victor Conti from the whole Baco scandal, and knowing that they did a year and a day, I'm thinking to myself, I was like, okay, cool. I'll be 3 times, 4 times, 5 times larger than them. So maybe they'll make an example out of me. I get 2 or 3 years. So I was prepared to do 2 to 3 years when the time came, because I'm making $27 million a year. So who cares? However, that wasn't necessarily the case. I just made an example out of myself, and they gave me almost damn near 8 years. However, when I started realizing that my clock was ticking, is that normally throughout the time of WFN's existence, when someone would have gotten caught, let's say en route to the post office or en route somewhere to deliver a large package, it could have been 1,000 bottles. I had some of the best attorneys on retainers. So what would happen is that they would get caught, keep their fucking mouth shut. 15 hours later, they're out of the cell that they're in. Charges dropped. I meet up with them, say, hey, what's going on? And they're like, hey, nothing's going on, man. Charges are dropped. I was like, great. Here, take 2 weeks off. You'll still get paid. Come back in 2 or 3 months. And those 2 or 3 months that I'm still paying them, but not working for me, I would do my own due diligence. But something happened